All business owners will be thinking about cost reduction. It can either occupy their minds as a continuum, or now and again it will enter into the headspace. In this week's I Hate Numbers video, I'm going to present a framework which looks at cost reduction. We're going to answer questions such as, when should I implement a cost reduction program? And how do I go about implementing an effective cost reduction program? And how do I make sure it's successful? Hi folks, my name is Mahmood. I'm an accountant, business finance coach for over 28 years, and I've been helping ambitious business owners make more profits, save tax, save time, reduce their stress and anxiety, and increase their financial awareness. And who wouldn't want that sort of business? Let's crack on with this week's video. Now, the first key question is, when should you be thinking about cost reduction? Now, I prefer to use the term cost management or cost challenging, and my answer to that question would be, it should be a continuum. Whether your business is facing financial challenges, whether you see the bailiffs knocking on your door, or whether you're a very profitable and growing business, cost consciousness, challenging costs and resources should always be a continuum. Not just for yourself, but your team members as well. Look at cost reduction, look at cost management as a positive thing. Don't look at that as a negative thing, think of that as a positive thing. The relationship between reducing the costs where you need to means that any revenues that you generate, there'll be more left over for profit, you'll become more sustainable, and your business will not only survive, but will prosper as well. The next key question is, when you've considered when that should be happening, is how do you go about that? Well, there are 3 or 4 key things you need to take on board if you want to implement an effective cost reduction program. Number 1, you need to make sure that it's a participatory exercise. You need to create that culture. You need to get your team members involved in the exercise. Imposing costs from above as a fait accompli will lead to demotivation, lead to negativity, and the likelihood of it being successfully implemented is going to be quite small. So make sure you've got buy-in, make sure you've got participation, and make sure you've got contributions and understanding from yourself and the rest of your team. One of the things you need to make sure that you've got for an effective cost reduction program is to identify what is your key objectives, what is your end goal, and to make sure any cost reduction program that you implement has to meet you still arriving at those end objectives, to make sure your strategy is still executed, make sure it's still implemented. Doing a cost reduction exercise in isolation, ignoring what you set yourself out as your plan, your objectives, your destination point, will be a very half-baked exercise. Make sure it's in harmony. If you are a quality service provider, if you're going to be cutting down costs in terms of that support network that you need to keep your customers happy, to support your customers, then you're going to have a disconnect and your quality proposition is going to suffer as a result. If you're a quality manufacturer and you decide to distribute very cheap carrier bags as a result, there's going to be a disconnect and your quality objective will not be fully met. So make sure you've got a clarity about what your strategy is, what your objectives are, what your end destination point. Any cost reduction program must align with those key objectives. What else do we need to worry about and think about to implement an effective cost reduction program? Well, you need to understand what your costs actually are. Now, it seems bizarre, doesn't it? It seems common sense, but far too many business owners don't actually understand what their costs are. So make sure that your data capture systems, your accounting systems, not only capture costs by transactional value, but what they relate to, what products and services they're supporting, what products and services they're associated with. Now, having understood what those costs are by broad brush by type, you also need to understand why called the value added, the non-value added costs are, or if you prefer, the good and the bad costs are. Those costs that do not support you in the provision of your services, those costs that do not serve any purpose enhancing customer value, customer experience, those costs that are non-value added, that really contribute nothing to your business, then those are the ones you should be identifying for a reduction or elimination. Costs that help you deliver in terms of that service, costs that support you in your business activity are the ones you should be conscious of. Now, I use the word support costs here. Other people might use the word overheads. Overhead is a particularly negative term. It implies it's a cost that's redundant. Nobody can have a business without having some support function, some infrastructure, whether it's IT, whether it's accounting, whether it's HR. Those services are there to support the product, to support the service. So don't go willy-nilly slashing and burning. What else do we need to think in terms of? Well, we need to think in terms of the time frame for which we want to cut those costs. Anything you do in the short term, be careful that it doesn't damage your business in the long term. You may think, actually, if I cut costs here and it's only a few pounds, remember the compounding effect. Saving a few pounds here and there has the cumulative effect of contributing a large amount of saving. Now remember, that's the cost saving. The value that generates for you can be much bigger than that. So folks, let's summarize what we have so far. We need to have buy-in from our team. We need to understand what our costs currently are. We need to have that culture that actually encourages cost reductions, cost savings, okay, irrespective of where we are in our business cycle. We need to have a clarity of objectives, a clarity of what our plan is, and we need to make sure we cut those costs that align with still supporting and arriving at our end objectives. Think about the time frame. Don't be over ambitious. Don't slash and burn and cut costs in the short term if that means you'll suffer in the long term detrimentally. Underpinning all that, make sure you've got a financial plan, a cash flow that looks at the impact of those activities, those cost reductions, and the impact it makes. Now, in next week's video, I'm going to be more prescriptive and actually provide some fuller detail of some of the techniques that we can adopt and some of the areas that we can look at for reducing costs. If you found this video useful, folks, I'd love it if you give some feedback, perhaps share it with those who you feel will benefit. And until next week, happy thinking.